It was one of those violent, chaotic storms, the kind where the thunder rattles the windows and the rain never lets up. The sound of the downpour hitting the pavement below was a constant, drumming beat, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the room in stark, momentary brilliance. I sat in the corner of my small apartment, tucked into the worn armchair by the window, reading a book I'd been meaning to finish for weeks. I'd made tea earlier, now cold and untouched on the table beside me, my mind far away in the pages of the novel. I could hear the wind howling outside, bending the trees with gusts that seemed more like warning calls than nature's usual temper. But then, out of the blue, there was a knock at the door. It was odd. The sound was both urgent and yet oddly calm, as if the person on the other side was trying to hide their panic. I set my book aside, a sense of unease already creeping over me. I stood up, my bare feet meeting the chilled floor, and approached the door. I peered through the peephole, half expecting to see a drenched neighbor, someone looking for shelter or help from the storm. But the hallway outside was empty, save for the dim light spilling from the overhead bulb. I opened the door, just a crack, squinting into the dark corridor beyond. Nothing, except for a soaked, tattered coat, lying in a heap just outside my door, as if it had been discarded carelessly. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the coat. It didn't belong to me, and there was no reason for anyone to have left it there, especially in this weather. I was about to close the door, chalking it up to a misplaced piece of clothing or some bizarre prank, but then I heard it. A whisper. It was soft, a barely audible murmur, but clear enough that I could hear it through the wood of the door. My name. Ellis. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. It was my name, no mistake about it. But there was no one standing outside. I hesitated, my mind racing. I should ignore it. I should lock the door and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But something tugged at me, an instinct I couldn't ignore. Stepping out into the hallway, I looked around, the dim lighting casting long, eerie shadows on the cracked tile floor. The air smelled of dampness, rain, and something older, as if the storm had brought something from far beyond the walls of this apartment building. I knelt down and picked up the coat. It was heavy, weighed down by water, and as I held it, I noticed something strange. A small, hand-sewn tag was stitched into the inner lining. I pulled it open with trembling fingers, expecting it to be some brand name or care instructions. But instead, I saw 2 words written in faded, delicate stitching. I am you. I stared at the tag, my mind racing. My hand shook as I turned the coat over, as if I expected to find something else hidden inside, something that could explain why it had appeared at my door. But there was nothing. The fabric was simple, worn from years of use. I looked down the hallway again, but it was still empty. The door to the neighboring apartment was ajar, a sliver of light cutting through the darkness. But nothing moved. I stepped back inside, feeling a cold shiver run down my spine. What the hell was going on? Suddenly, the air in the apartment felt thick, heavy. A sensation of being watched settled over me, as if invisible eyes were tracking my every movement. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support, still holding the coat. The storm outside raged, but within the apartment, the silence felt suffocating. I draped the coat over the back of my chair, intending to deal with it later. Maybe it was some bizarre prank. Maybe someone had left it by mistake. But the whisper, that whisper of my name, still echoed in my mind, sending ripples of dread through me. I tried to focus on my book again, but my concentration shattered. The wind outside grew more intense, the thunder booming in a way that felt almost unnatural. Then it happened. The whisper again, closer this time, as if it were right behind me. Ellis. I spun around, heart pounding in my chest, but the apartment was empty. Only the coat, still draped over the chair, seemed to stand as an anchor to the growing dread creeping through the air. I was alone, but the whisper felt so real, so tangible, that I almost expected to see a shadow, a figure emerging from the darkness. A sudden realization hit me. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the coat with the strange cryptic message. I approached the chair cautiously, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Slowly, I reached out and touched the coat. The instant my fingers brushed against the fabric, something inside me stirred. A sensation that wasn't quite physical, but deep within me. Like the coat was calling to some hidden part of myself. The whisper returned, this time clear and unmistakable. I am you. The words settled into me like a slow-burning ember. Panic surged through me, and I yanked my hand away from the coat. But then I looked at the reflection in the window. A faint, distorted image, as if something were shifting within it. My face, my own reflection, was there. But it seemed different. The person looking back at me didn't seem quite right. His eyes were too wide, his expression too calm for the storm raging outside. And the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't me at all. It was him, the stranger from the coat. I stumbled back, knocking the chair over. The storm outside howled louder, and for a moment everything seemed to blur. Sound, vision, reality itself. And then the apartment was silent again. When I looked back at the coat, the whisper had stopped. The tag was now gone, as if it had never been there in the first place. The air in the room felt oppressive, and I knew, deep down, that something had changed. The storm had brought something into my life, something I could neither explain nor escape. I wanted to lock the coat away, toss it out, but I couldn't bring myself to. Not after seeing that reflection. Not after hearing that voice,